You are aware of pressure and warmth and a profound, suffocating darkness. Your world is the curved, leathery interior of a shell, buried under a shallow layer of sand that feels impossibly heavy. Muffled thuds from the outside world are your only company, indistinct tremors of a planet that has no idea you are about to join it. You don't have a thought, not in any way you would later understand it. There is only a single, primordial command humming through your brittle bones, out. You press, you squirm, your strange, elongated head pushing against the yielding membrane. A crack appears. A sliver of blinding, humid light pierces your prison. You push again, driven by an instinct millions of years in the making. The shell gives way, and you spill out into the world, a sticky, undignified mess of limbs and damp skin, covered in sand and amniotic fluid. You take your first breath of the thick, hazy Jurassic air. It burns. Ah, consciousness returns to nature's most tragically optimistic aeronautical experiment. Official designation, Pterodactylus antiquus. But you will be known to a future world simply as the pterodactyl, from the Greek for wing finger. A name that is both clinically accurate and viscerally unsettling, like calling a human a headlump. It is a perfect, unflattering summary of your design philosophy. Function over elegance, with a heavy emphasis on the bizarre. Congratulations on being born. The good news is, your odds of survival just skyrocketed from 0% to slightly above 0%. The bad news is, everything else. Your nursery is not a cozy, well-defended fortress of twigs and love. It is a communal dumping ground on a scorching volcanic beach, a sprawling, chaotic maternity ward where the primary childcare strategy is safety in numbers. Your mother, a creature you will never know, visited this beach weeks ago with the singular, unceremonious purpose of depositing you and your siblings into the sand before promptly abandoning you forever. Her parental duties were fulfilled the moment you were laid. She has a 0% interest in your survival. You are an orphan the moment you take that first searing breath, and you are not alone. All around you, the sand erupts with dozens of your squirming, gawky brethren, all spilling out into the world with the same confused terror. This is not a touching family reunion. This is a buffet. The very first danger you face is not some grand, monstrous dinosaur roaring in the distance. It is the creature that hatched 2 inches to your left. He is marginally larger than you, and he broke free from his egg a full 10 seconds before you did. A lifetime in evolutionary terms. He is not looking at you with brotherly affection. He is looking at you as a convenient, protein-rich first meal to fuel his own escape from this sandy death trap. In your family, cannibalism isn't a shocking transgression. It's the appetizer on the lifelong menu of misery. You are born into a world that wants to kill you, and your own kind has the courtesy to try first. You untangle your disproportionately huge wings, thin membranes of skin stretched along a single, freakishly long finger, and stagger forward. Every instinct screams at you to move, to get away from the nest, from your murderous siblings, from this entire unfortunate situation. Your first moments of life are not a gentle awakening, but a frantic, clumsy scramble for your life over the bodies of the less fortunate. You stumble through the chaos of the hatching ground, a landscape of broken shells and struggling newborns. The air is thick with the metallic scent of birth and the first, faint coppery tang of death. An overhead shadow passes, and you instinctively freeze. It's one of the larger pterosaurs, a distant cousin, circling like a vulture, patiently waiting for the weakest stragglers to exhaust themselves. You are the popcorn of the Mesozoic era, a bite-sized snack for nearly everything that moves. To survive your first day is to win a lottery in which the prize is simply the chance to play again tomorrow. As a juvenile, a flapling, your life becomes a relentless exercise in evasion. Your main adversaries are not the colossal, headline-grabbing carnivores. You aren't worthy of their attention yet. You are tormented by the B-list predators, the scrappy opportunists who thrive on the vulnerable. There are the small, wiry dinosaurs like Compsognathus, darting through the coastal ferns like feathered piranhas on legs. They watch you with beady, intelligent eyes, just waiting for you to stumble on a root or get distracted by an insect. You must learn to fear the rustle of leaves more than the roar of a distant giant. The water's edge is no safer. It is a line between two different worlds of casual horror. Ancient, patient crocodiles lurk in the murky shallows, their snouts barely breaking the surface, indistinguishable from floating logs. They wait for you to make a clumsy landing while trying to snatch a small fish, their stillness a mask for explosive violence. Predatory fish with mouths full of needle-sharp teeth patrol the coastal waters, ready to lunge at any shadow that dips too close. Even the air, your supposed domain, is not your own. Larger, more experienced pterosaurs of your own and other species see you as little more than a mid-air nuisance and a potential meal. The sky is not a majestic highway of freedom. It's a murder-filled airspace with no traffic controllers and a strict might makes right policy. Your primary survival strategy is not courage, strength, or cunning. It is to be just slightly faster and more profoundly awkward than the sibling flying next to you. That's it. You have no real defenses to speak of. Your beak is long and pointed, but it's designed for snapping up fish, not for combat. It has all the defensive capability of a pair of tweezers. Your claws are for clinging to cliff sides, not for tearing flesh. Your only recourse when danger appears is the panic flap. It is your signature move. You launch yourself into the air with all the grace of a dropped laundry basket, squawking a pathetic, high-pitched alarm as you windmill your wings in a desperate, uncoordinated frenzy. You are not so much flying as you are falling upwards in sheer terror, hoping to accidentally catch a thermal. Your evasive maneuver is the aerial equivalent of a human trying to run away in a dream. There's a tremendous amount of frantic, windmilling motion, but you don't seem to cover much ground very quickly. You are a multi-million-dollar evolutionary fighter jet equipped with the flight software of a free-to-play mobile game. It's buggy, it's unresponsive, and it is profoundly prone to crashing. Learning the ropes of being you is a curriculum of failure. Hunting, for instance, is a constant humiliation. You must learn to skim the shimmering surface of the water to snatch small fish. Your first attempts are a spectacular comedy of errors. You misjudge the distance and smack face first into the water, emerging spluttering and half-drowned. You manage to catch a fish that is slightly too large, and you nearly choke on it, tumbling through the air as you try to swallow. On one particularly memorable occasion, you get so intensely focused on a wriggling fish that you fail to notice the prehistoric shark lunging from the depths below, its jaws snapping shut inches from your tail. You learn a valuable lesson. Starvation is bad, but being an appetizer is worse. Landing is another skill you must master through repeated, painful failure. You do not so much land as you arrive unexpectedly. A graceful, controlled descent is a concept for other, more competently designed creatures. Your technique involves spotting a vaguely suitable patch of rock or a tree branch, and then simply ceasing all flight activities in its general vicinity. You tumble into trees, getting your wing fingers tangled in branches and hanging upside down for an embarrassing amount of time. You skid across sandy beaches, face planting and rolling in a flurry of limbs. You frequently misjudge the wind and crash directly into your peers, leading to a cascade of squawking, tumbling bodies. Any landing you can walk away from is considered a resounding success. Flying is what you were born to do, but it is the stopping that proves to be the hardest part. And yet, somehow, against all statistical probability and the judgment of good taste, you make it. The years of near misses, clumsy hunts, and crash landings chisel you into a survivor. You are no longer a fragile flapling. You are a fully grown pterodactylus, a master of the skies. Your wings, once flimsy and awkward, are now powerful, leathery engines, spanning a respectable width. Your head is adorned with a magnificent, fully formed crest, a proud, keratinous billboard proclaiming your genetic viability. The small, terrestrial predators that once sent you into a panic flurry now scatter from your passing shadow. You are no longer the hunted. For the most part, you are the hunter. Life has, by all objective measures, improved. You can soar on the ocean thermals for hours, a tiny, effortless speck against the vast, blue canvas of the sky. You look down upon the brutish, land-locked world below with a sense of detached superiority. Your hunting dives are no longer clumsy gambles, but acts of surgical precision. You spot the silver glint of a fish from 100 feet up, fold your wings, and plummet towards the water, snatching your meal with a clean, satisfying snap of your beak. You have claimed a prime nesting spot on a high, windswept cliff face, inaccessible to ground-based riff-raff and sheltered from the worst of the storms. For the first time in your short, brutal life, you experience a fleeting, unfamiliar sensation, a sense of security. The constant, gnawing fear of imminent death has subsided into a dull, manageable hum. Life is finally, predictably, stable. And it is precisely at this moment, just as you begin to think you figured it all out, that a new, far more humiliating and existentially taxing problem emerges: the primal, inescapable burden of reproduction. Being hunted by ravenous carnivores, you will soon learn, was a simple, straightforward kind of misery. The absurd theater of courtship is infinitely worse. Your magnificent crest, which you had mistakenly assumed was a symbol of your power and status, is actually just a ridiculously fragile, aerodynamically inconvenient, and brightly colored advertisement designed to attract a mate. It's a biological pickup line, permanently attached to your skull. The bigger and more ostentatiously colored it is, the more likely you are to impress a discerning female. Unfortunately, it's also more likely to get snagged in trees during a clumsy landing, or act as a giant eat-me sign for the very few, very large predators who might still consider you a worthwhile meal. It is both your greatest asset and your most profound liability. The real horror, however, is the competition. The cliffside is littered with other males, each one just as desperate and ridiculous looking as you are. They all want your prime nesting spot, and they all want to impress the same small pool of available females. This does not lead to epic, noble battles of honor and strength. It leads to pathetic, squawking, shoving matches on precarious, windswept ledges, where the loser simply tumbles off the cliff in a flurry of indignation. The primary form of competition is the mating display. This is a ritual of such profound absurdity that it makes your juvenile crash landings look like acts of sublime grace. It begins with head bobbing, a vigorous nodding motion designed to show off the size and color of your crest. You and your rival will stand a few feet apart, bobbing your heads at each other like two dashboard ornaments in a moving car. This is followed by wing flashing, where you stretch your wings to their full span and angle them towards the sun, the prehistoric equivalent of showing off an expensive watch. The grand finale is a bizarre, clumsy dance. You hop from foot to foot, puff out your throat pouch, and emit a series of loud, guttural squawks that echo across the cliffs. It looks less like a courtship ritual and more like an animal having a severe and prolonged allergic reaction. You spend weeks performing these mortifying displays, pouring all your energy into looking as impressive and as foolish as possible, all for a few fleeting moments of genetic legacy building. It is a soul-crushing expenditure of dignity for the briefest of rewards. But the peak, like everything in your life, is disappointingly short-lived. The decline is not sudden and dramatic, but a slow, creeping erosion of competence. Your leathery wings, stretched and battered by millions of flight cycles and countless clumsy landings, begin to show their age. Small tears appear along the edges, subtle at first, but they affect your aerodynamics. A dull, persistent ache, a touch of Mesozoic arthritis, sets into the joints of your all-important wing finger. The effortless soaring of your youth now requires conscious, tiring effort. Your eyesight, once sharp enough to spot the twitch of a fish's fin from 100 feet up, begins to blur. Your hunting dives become less accurate, more of a gamble. You miss more than you catch. The frustration is a new and bitter flavor of suffering. You begin to lose weight, your ribs becoming more prominent beneath your skin. Your once vibrant crest, the source of so much pride and so much trouble, begins to fade, its colors losing their luster. Your status on the cliffside plummets. You are yesterday's news. Younger, stronger males, with their obnoxiously large, flawlessly colored crests and their pristine, untorn wings, now mock you with their effortless aerial displays. They perform their ridiculous mating dances with a vigor you can no longer muster. They easily steal your fish right out of the air, their movements too quick for your aging reflexes to counter. Eventually, inevitably, one of them challenges you for your prime nesting spot. The shoving match is brief. You are easily pushed aside, forced to retreat in disgrace. You are relegated to the subpar nesting grounds on the lower ledges, exposed to the wind and the contempt of the colony's rising stars. You are now officially a has-been. Your final confrontation is not with a noble predator or a fearsome rival. It is with a mundane, indifferent reality. During a routine fishing run, struggling against a headwind that would have been trivial in your youth, a sudden, violent gust catches you off guard. Your worn-out wings, with their tiny tears and aching joints, cannot compensate. You try to correct, to fight against the wind, but you lack the strength. You tumble from the sky, not in a dramatic plummet, but in a slow, uncontrolled spiral. Or perhaps the end is even less dignified. Weakened by days of hunger after a series of failed hunts, you are cornered on a low-lying beach by that same pack of wiry Compsognathus you so easily terrorized in your prime. You try to launch yourself into the air, but your legs tremble, your wings feel impossibly heavy. There's no glorious final stand. There is only the tired, undignified end of a machine that is finally broken down. You die as you lived, anonymously and without ceremony. Your body, a fragile collection of hollow bones and thin membrane, is a gift to the ecosystem you briefly belonged to. It is scavenged within hours. The small dinosaurs you once hunted now pick your bones clean. Crabs carry away the last scraps of flesh. The tide rolls in, scattering your skeleton, pressing your bones into the soft coastal mud where they will lie undisturbed, buried under accumulating layers of sediment. There is no mourning. There is no legacy. The uncaring machinery of the planet simply absorbs you back into its raw materials. Your brief, anxious spark of consciousness is extinguished as if it had never been. And as your last recognizable bone sinks into the silt, the camera of this bleak nature documentary pans back to that same communal, chaotic beach. The sun beats down, and the sand begins to stir. A new clutch of eggs, laid in the very same shallow scrape, is hatching. Dozens of sticky, confused fledglings, indistinguishable from the creature you once were, tumble out into the blinding light. They take their first breath. They look at each other with that same mixture of terror and hunger. They begin the exact same pointless, tragicomic, and utterly doomed struggle that you just endured. One of them, a little quicker than the rest, immediately eats its smaller sibling. The cycle resets. Nothing has been learned. Nothing has changed. So that was your life. A frantic, humiliating scramble from a disposable birth to an insignificant death. A brief, bloody, and ultimately pointless chapter in the planet's vast, boring book of failures. You'd think that oblivion would be a sweet release. You'd think the end of your story is, finally, the end. But you, my friend, were about to get a horrifying epilogue. Your personal tragedy was over. Your historical one was just beginning. For 150 million years, you enjoyed the profound peace and quiet of being extinct. Nobody judged your weird head crest. Nobody pointed out your absurd finger wings. You were blissfully, perfectly non-existent, your bones sleeping comfortably under a future continent. Then, in the late 18th century, a new kind of primate started digging. A primate obsessed with giving names to things, and more importantly, with getting things profoundly wrong. A primate that had mastered the art of survival so thoroughly that it now had the leisure time to ponder the dead. And that's when they found you. And your real problem started. The first humans to systematically study you were not superstitious primitives living in caves. They were the supposedly enlightened naturalists of the European Enlightenment, men of science and reason. They didn't see a god or a demon when they unearthed your bones. They saw a puzzle that infuriated them. When your first beautifully articulated fossil was chiseled out of the fine-grained limestone of Bavaria in 1784, the lead scientist, an Italian naturalist named Cosimo Collini, had absolutely no idea what he was looking at. He saw your long, slender limbs, your elongated head, and your famously strange hands, and his educated guess was that you were some kind of sea creature. He decided, with all the confidence of a man who was about to be proven spectacularly wrong, that you used your long arms as flippers or paddles, an inhabitant of the ancient oceans. The reaction among his peers was not awe, but a storm of academic squabbling. Your fossil became the subject of passive-aggressive letters and snide journal articles exchanged between stuffy European museums. Another, more famous anatomist, the Frenchman Georges Cuvier, examined a drawing of the fossil and, in a moment of brilliant insight, declared Collini an idiot. Cuvier correctly identified the faint outline of a wing membrane and realized that your long finger was not for paddling, but for supporting a wing. He gave you the name that would stick, Pterodactyl, the wing finger. But the debate was far from over. Others looked at your bones and argued you were a transitional kind of bat. Some suggested you were a bizarre bird-mammal hybrid, a missing link that linked the wrong things. Your entire identity, your very place in the grand, recently conceived tree of life, was being fiercely debated by bewigged men who had never seen anything fly that wasn't a bird or an insect. You went from being an apex aerial predator ruling the Jurassic skies to being the subject of a bitter custody battle between rival academics. It's the posthumous equivalent of having your distant, unborn relatives argue over your will. Except they're not fighting over your money. They're fighting about whether you used your arms to swim, fly, or perhaps just for awkward gesturing. Your new divine purpose in this new world was to be a poster child for a shocking and controversial new theory, extinction. Up until this point, the prevailing idea was that God would never create a creature only to let it perish. Your bizarre, alien form was a direct challenge to that worldview. Cuvier, your intellectual godfather, used you as his prime example of a creature from a lost world, a life form so strange, so utterly unlike anything alive, that it couldn't possibly be hiding in some unexplored corner of the globe. You weren't worshipped as a deity. You were weaponized as a piece of evidence in a philosophical argument. You were Exhibit A in the case for a dead, forgotten creation. A fossilized testament to the fact that the universe could, and did, have failures. This new status triggered a different kind of hunt. The hunt was now on for more of your bones. Quarry workers in the Solnhofen limestone pits were offered bounties to keep an eye out for your remains, a wanted dead or deader campaign for your skeleton. Your body, once a cohesive biological machine, was now a collection of valuable parts to be sold to the highest bidder. Museums in Paris, London, and Munich, along with wealthy private collectors, competed fiercely to own a piece of you. Your skeleton, or even just a fragment of it, became a status symbol, a macabre curiosity for a gentleman's cabinet. The ironic gap between your life and your afterlife was immense. You spent your entire existence trying to avoid being caught and eaten, only to have your eternal rest disturbed so you could become a conversation piece in a rich man's parlor. They would gather around your fossilized remains, sipping port and brandy, marveling at your monstrous features, completely oblivious to the fact that the most monstrous thing in the room was their floral wallpaper and their colonial-era entitlement. You were no longer an animal. You were an artifact, an object of morbid fascination. As more fossils of your larger, more intimidating cousins were discovered throughout the 19th century, the giant pteranodons from America, the toothy Rhamphorhynchus from your own backyard, you became a key figure in the popular imagination's vision of a savage, prehistoric world. The dawning science of Paleard needed villains, and you were perfectly cast. Early paleontological illustrations and paintings depicted you as a scaly, bat-winged demon, a leathery gargoyle brought to life. You were almost always shown menacing the small, furry, and supposedly defenseless mammals that were scurrying around under the feet of the dinosaurs. These mammals, of course, were the designated protagonists of the grand evolutionary story, the humble, put-upon ancestors of the very people drawing the pictures. You were cast as the ghoulish, primitive failure that had to be cleared away to make room for their inevitable, triumphant rise. The injustice of it all is staggering. You existed and dominated the skies for tens of millions of years before most of these mammals even dreamed of getting bigger than a shrew. But in their self-serving narrative, you were a villain, an evolutionary dead end, a narrative obstacle that had to be overcome. You weren't a pest that wandered through their primitive agricultural fields. You were a conceptual villain in their story of progress, a symbol of an old, flawed world that had to be swept aside. They built their entire conception of prehistory on a foundation of your bones, and then had the audacity to paint you as the monster living in the basement. You weren't just extinct. You were retroactively demonized, turned into a hissable villain in a play that was written long after you had taken your final, unceremonious bow. The ultimate cynical takeaway from this first era of your posthumous career is that being discovered by science is not an honor. It is an autopsy followed by a character assassination. Your legacy wasn't to be remembered for what you were, a marvel of biological engineering, and one of history's most successful vertebrates. It was to be fundamentally misunderstood, and then recast as a prop in someone else's heroic origin story. Congratulations, you've been classified. Your first chapter in the world of humanity was to be mislabeled, bought, sold, and turned into a cheap Victorian bogeyman. And the really bad news, the artists and showmen hadn't even gotten to the movie deals yet. That particular humiliation was still to come. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, your name was a household word. You had graduated from the dusty halls of academia to the pages of popular fiction. But this familiarity bred, as it so often does, contempt, and more importantly, wild, energetic inaccuracy. You were no longer just a scientific specimen to be debated. You were becoming a stock character, a reliable monster for adventure stories. In Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel, The Lost World, you are portrayed as a terrifying, bloodthirsty, and thoroughly malevolent creature, a foul, obscene creature with a venomous temper. This was the image that would stick. You had officially transitioned from a scientific curiosity to a bona fide B-movie monster, even before B-movies were invented. Your image was now in the hands of storytellers and showmen, people who were far more interested in thrills than in paleontological accuracy. Your new job title in this burgeoning age of mass media was inaccurate movie monster. Your likeness, or at least a lurid interpretation of it, was now a product to be exploited. You were systematically misrepresented for profit. You were slapped onto the posters of cheap pulp novels, often depicted carrying off a scantily clad woman. You were brought to life in early films through the jerky, unsettling magic of stop-motion animation, a process that perfectly captured your supposed alien nature. Every new depiction took you another step further from reality and another step closer to caricature. They gave you sharp, canine-like teeth you didn't possess. They insisted on giving you slick, leathery, bat-like skin, even as fossil evidence began to hint that you and your relatives were likely covered in a coat of downy proto-feathers called pycnofibers. They gave you a piercing, screeching roar, a sound effect fabricated in a Foley studio, when in reality you probably made a series of guttural squawks and hisses. Your value was no longer scientific. It was commercial. It was measured in box office receipts and book sales. You became a reliable jump scare, a convenient shorthand for prehistoric danger. Your complex and fascinating life cycle, your varied diet, your place in a rich and complex ecosystem, all of it was irrelevant. All that mattered to your new human employers was how menacing you looked on a poster and how effectively you could terrorize the film's heroes. You were a wild creature that had been posthumously domesticated into a predictable trope. Your strength, your unique anatomy, your very existence was mine not for knowledge, but for entertainment. You were an entry in a ledger book, a dependable asset in the portfolio of fictional monsters. The collateral damage of this era was a massacre of your character. As the technology of filmmaking progressed, the depictions of you only became more energetically and spectacularly wrong. Better special effects, from stop motion to men in rubber suits to early computer-generated imagery, simply allowed for more dramatic and more paleontologically absurd portrayals. You were frequently shown snatching and flying away with cavemen, a chronological impossibility of about 66 million years that no filmmaker ever let get in the way of a good scene. You were depicted as a clumsy, flapping creature, constantly struggling to stay aloft, a narrative trope designed to make your eventual defeat at the hands of the hero seem more plausible. This one-sided slaughter of your reputation was happening at the very same time that science was slowly, painstakingly, and with much academic debate, correcting the record. New fossil discoveries were revealing your true diversity. Scientists were realizing that you weren't a single creature, but a vast and varied order of animals, the Pterosauria, which ranged from the size of a sparrow to the size of a giraffe. They were discovering that most of you were not clumsy flappers, but sophisticated gliders. They were confirming, through fossilized impressions, that you were likely covered in those pycnofibers, meaning you were not a scaly demon but a fuzzy, and perhaps even colorful creature. But the truth, as is so often the case, couldn't compete with a good story. Hollywood's version of you was louder, scarier, and much more profitable. The image of the screeching, scaly, woman-snatching gargoyle was cemented in the public consciousness, and no amount of carefully researched scientific papers could ever fully erase it. The deeply ironic summary of this age is that humanity's growing ability to visualize and recreate the past was used not to understand you, but to slander you. Your name became famous, but your true nature was erased, painted over with layers of cinematic fantasy. Your reward for being the first vertebrate in the history of the planet to achieve powered flight, a biological miracle of engineering, was to be posthumously typecast for eternity as generic flying monster Ashwan. You were the Orville Wright of the animal kingdom, and they turned you into a glorified, screeching stuntman for a series of increasingly terrible action movies. It was a tragic demotion. From a ruler of the skies to a creature that gets unceremoniously swatted out of it by King Kong. Then came the modern and industrial world, the age of sentimental hypocrisy. In the late 20th and 21st centuries, you were redefined once more. Science, now armed with powerful computers, CT scanners, and a wealth of new fossil finds from around the globe, finally started to get you right. The dinosaur renaissance spilled over to you. Paleoartists, working closely with scientists, began to depict you not as a monster, but as a living, breathing animal. You were fuzzy. You were colorful. You walked on all fours, using your wing knuckles as front feet in a surprisingly efficient gait. You were a complex and diverse group of animals, occupying a multitude of ecological niches. The real you was, in many ways, far more fascinating and bizarre than the monster you replaced. But this new, accurate you had to compete with a century of established pop culture baggage. So your identity was split. You became a brand with multiple, conflicting product lines. For children, you were transformed into a cute, friendly, and completely toothless character in educational cartoons and brightly colored books. You became a cheap plastic toy, often molded in a lurid, unnatural color, stuffed into a box of sugary cereal. For corporations, your ancient and powerful silhouette was streamlined into a sleek, stylized logo for a tech company or an airline, a symbol of progress and forward momentum. And for the blockbuster movie franchises, you were resurrected once again, this time as a hyper-realistic CGI creature, rendered with stunning, scientifically informed detail, and still cast as a terrifying, screeching monster that terrorizes tourists at a theme park. You were no longer a creature. You were a malleable intellectual property. You existed simultaneously as a scientific specimen to be studied, a cute character to sell merchandise, a corporate logo to inspire confidence, and a digital monster to sell popcorn. Your identity was a fractured mess, a reflection of a species that wanted to see you as all things at once, a wonder of nature, a cuddly friend, and a terrifying threat. After a century of being a villain and a brief stint as a corporate mascot, your final job in the human world is to inspire guilt-free wonder. Your purpose today is to be an object of sanitized, family-friendly awe. You are a key attraction in the multi-million-dollar museum exhibits that have become the modern temples of natural history. These exhibits are masterpieces of curation, designed to elicit a gasp from children and to gently guide their parents towards the gift shop, where plush toy versions of you, complete with soft, fluffy pycnofibers, are waiting to be purchased. You are a tool for education, but an education that has been carefully curated to be entertaining, awe-inspiring, and entirely non-threatening. The messy, brutal realities of your existence, the sibling cannibalism, the pathetic mating dances, the constant, grinding fear, are conveniently edited out of the display placards. Your fossils, the very bones that were once argued over by bewigged naturalists, are now the main event. They are mounted in dramatic, soaring poses, held together by steel armatures and lit with theatrical, colored lights. You are a spectacle of extinction, housed within the climate-controlled zoos for the dead that we call museums. You are a guaranteed crowd pleaser. People, descendants of those tiny, furry mammals you once ignored, now stare up at your silent skeleton and say, wow. They feel a pleasant, fleeting sense of connection to a vanished, epic world. They take a photo for their social media feed, perhaps adding a filter. Then they move on to the gem collection or the cafeteria. Your life's entire brutal saga has been reduced to a 5-minute stop on a family's day out. This is what your conservation looks like. It is the ultimate, most profound act of hypocrisy. Humanity, a species currently presiding over the planet's 6th mass extinction event, a species that is actively wiping out thousands of living creatures through its own carelessness and consumption, spends millions of dollars and countless hours to meticulously preserve your dead bones. They protect you with more care, more advanced technology, and more financial resources than they afford to countless living species that are teetering on the brink of an oblivion you have already known for 66 million years. This is the prison of kindness. From your silent, fossilized perspective, what is this strange new existence? Your remains are encased in protective plaster jackets, flown across the world in cargo planes, subjected to the penetrating gaze of CT scanners, and reassembled behind velvet ropes and panes of reinforced glass. You are a perpetual patient in the intensive care unit of history, constantly being poked, prodded, analyzed, and displayed by the species that inherited your world. The descendants of your destroyers. Not that you were ever destroyed by them. You just had the bad luck of being on the wrong side of an asteroid, are now your eternal caretakers. Tourists with their chattering children and their glowing phones press their faces against the glass, their warm, living breath fogging up the barrier that separates their world from yours. They take selfies with your skeleton, their fleeting, smiling faces a bizarre and jarring counterpoint to your permanent, fossilized death grimace. You are a living museum exhibit, except you are not living. You are a monument to a time they can never experience, and they are the wardens of your eternal, silent incarceration. The ultimate, most profound irony of your modern, posthumous existence is that humanity's final act of kindness towards you is to transform you into a beautiful, tragic, and utterly safe ghost. They adore you now, precisely because you are gone. You pose no threat. You cannot inconvenience their plans for a new highway or a coastal resort. You cannot disrupt their fisheries. You cannot, God forbid, snatch one of their pampered pets from a backyard. You can only hang silently from the ceiling of a museum hall, a magnificent, bony sculpture, and remind them of a time when the world was truly wild, a concept they find both romantic and deeply terrifying. They love the idea of you, but they would be horrified by the reality of you. And so you hang, suspended by wires, forever locked in a dramatic, soaring pose you likely never held for more than a few seconds in your actual life. You have become the perfect symbol of tragic loss. They look at your skeleton, at the impossible architecture of your wing fingers, and the elegant crest on your skull, and they feel a sense of wistful melancholy for a world they never knew. But what they are really mourning is not you. They are mourning their own lost connection to the natural world. They are mourning their own innocence, the one they paved over and polluted and drove to extinction. Your final, eternal, and most absurd tragedy is to serve as the silent, fossilized therapist for the very species that has spent the last 2 centuries failing to understand you. You are their prehistoric projection screen, a blank slate of bone onto which they project their fears, their fantasies, and their guilt. And you don't even get paid for it. Your story ends not with a bang, or even a whimper, but with the quiet, continuous hum of a museum's climate control system, preserving you forever in a state of perfect, profitable, and profoundly misunderstood dignity. This is the legacy you never asked for. From a disposable hatchling on a dangerous beach, to a terrified flapling in a sky full of predators, to a pathetically love-struck adult, to an aging failure, and finally, to an insignificant fossil. That should have been enough, but it wasn't. You were then forced to become a scientific puzzle, a villain in a book, a monster in a movie, a toy in a box, and finally, a secular saint in the Church of Natural History. You've been everything to them, except what you actually were, an animal just trying to get by in a world that was, from the very beginning, designed to kill you. And as the lights in the museum dim for the night, you are left alone in the dark once more, a silent king on a wire throne, reigning over an empty hall of echoes and dust. Your long, strange journey is, at last, complete, and utterly, beautifully meaningless. Let's rewind, shall we? Back to the very beginning. Before the frantic scramble, before the cannibalistic sibling, before even that first searing breath. Let's go back to the darkness. You are suspended in nourishing fluid, your undeveloped body folded in on itself like a piece of badly executed origami. Your world is a dull, reddish glow as the powerful Jurassic sun penetrates the sand and your thin, leathery shell. The dominant sensation is pressure, a constant, gentle squeeze from all sides. But there are sounds. The muffled, rhythmic roar of the surf is a constant, percussive bass line to your gestation. You can hear, or rather feel, the vibrations of things moving outside. The heavy, thudding footsteps of a large herbivore passing by, a tremor that shakes your entire world. You feel the frantic scratching of a small crab against your shell, a brief, terrifying vibration that thankfully moves on. This is not a peaceful womb. It is a state of profound vulnerability. You are a lottery ticket, buried in the sand. Your mother produced you and a dozen others like you not out of love, but out of a cold, biological calculation. She was hedging her bets. The logic of your species is brutal and simple. Lay enough eggs, and a few might just survive the gauntlet of predators, siblings, and sheer bad luck. You are not an individual yet. You are a data point. A single digit in a grim equation of survival. Your potential life is already mortgaged against the overwhelming probability of your immediate death. Then, the change begins. A chemical trigger, a shift in temperature, a signal you cannot comprehend but must obey. The instinct to get out becomes an all-consuming fire. Your folded limbs begin to twitch and push. Your beak, still soft, presses against the inner wall of your prison. You are fighting against your own container, a battle against the very thing that has sheltered you. Imagine the sheer, baffling panic. Every fiber of your being is screaming at you to break the only reality you have ever known. It is a frantic, claustrophobic struggle. For hours, you push and twist, exhausting your meager energy reserves. The air inside the egg grows stale, thick with your own exhalations. It's a race. Hatch before you suffocate. When the crack finally appears, it is a cataclysm. The sound is deafeningly sharp inside your shell. The light is not a gentle dawn, but a blinding, painful explosion. The outside air that rushes in is an alien gas, hot and full of strange, threatening smells, salt, iodine, and the unmistakable scent of decay. Your first glimpse of the world is not a beautiful vista, but a chaotic, terrifying blur of motion and sand. And then you spill out, not as a glorious new life, but as a casualty of your own birth, a weak, trembling, and utterly exposed creature in the middle of a war zone. Your wings are stuck to your body with fluid. Your legs can barely hold your weight. And the first thing you see clearly is the predatory glint in the eye of the thing that hatched beside you. Welcome to the world. Please try not to get eaten in the first 5 minutes. Your first flight attempts are a particular highlight of your pathetic youth. It is not an elegant soaring into the blue. It is a terrified leap off a low-lying rock, a moment of pure, gut-wrenching panic as you plummet towards the ground. You flap your ridiculous wings, all 4 limbs moving in a desperate, uncoordinated rhythm. The wing finger, your namesake, feels less like a miracle of evolution and more like a design flaw. It's a long, spindly spar of bone that feels like it could snap at any moment, stretching the wing membrane taut. You have to beat the air into submission. There is no grace. You are a flying brick. For every successful, clumsy launch, There are a dozen failures, short, uncontrolled drops that end with you sprawled on the sand, a dozen more that see you careening into a thorny cycad, and at least one that ends with you belly flopping into the water with a pathetic splash. You are a creature of the air who is terrified of heights, and for whom gravity is a personal and relentless nemesis. Let's revisit one of your early hunts. Not the sanitized version, but the reality. Not the sanitized version, but the reality. You are 3 months old, constantly hungry. Your ribs a xylophone beneath your skin. You see a small, beetle-like insect crawling on a fern frond near the edge of a clearing. It looks slow. It looks juicy. It looks like the first satisfying meal you might have in days. You abandon all caution, your stomach overriding the tiny, whispering voice of self-preservation in your brain. You swoop down, your landing less of a landing and more of a controlled crash, and you scuttle towards the fern. You are so focused on the beetle, on the prize, that you fail to notice the stillness in the surrounding undergrowth. The rustling has stopped. Just as your beak lunges for the insect, a flash of motion erupts from the side. It's a Compsognathus, no bigger than a chicken, but it moves with the speed and predatory focus of a striking snake. You squawk in terror, the beetle forgotten. You try to launch, to get into the air, your one and only defensive maneuver. But you are clumsy. Your wings get tangled in the fern. The predator is upon you, its small, needle-sharp teeth snapping at your tail. You feel a searing pain as it gets a mouthful of skin. The shock and terror give you a surge of adrenaline. You rip yourself free, leaving a scrap of your hide in the dinosaur's mouth, and you scramble into the air, flapping with a frantic, desperate power you didn't know you possessed. You don't look back. You fly, and you don't stop flying until the coastline is a distant line and your heart feels like it's going to beat its way out of your chest. You have survived, but you are still hungry, and you are now bleeding. The lesson is simple and brutal. In your world, every potential meal is also a potential trap. Every hunt is a gamble where the cost of losing is your own life. This constant, low-grade terror shapes you. It refines your instincts. You learn to check the shadows twice. You learn to distinguish the sound of the wind from the sound of a predator's breath. You learn that a silent forest is more dangerous than a noisy one. These are not lessons taught by a patient parent. They are lessons seared into your brain by near-death experiences. Your youth is not a time of playful discovery. It is a brutal, unceasing apprenticeship in the arts of paranoia and fear. And the only graduation certificate is surviving long enough to face the even more humiliating challenges of adulthood. The competition for mates deserves a closer look, for it is here that your species' inherent absurdity reaches its zenith. The shoving matches on the cliff ledges are not quick affairs. They are prolonged, pathetic struggles. Imagine two creatures whose primary advantage is the miracle of flight, reduced to a ground-based sumo match on a narrow precipice, hundreds of feet in the air. You and your rival puff up your throat pouches, hiss and squawk, and awkwardly push at each other with your shoulders and hands. It's a contest of balance and brute force, and it can go on for hours, a slow, grueling dance of intimidation. The wind whips around you, threatening to carry both of you away. The rest of the colony largely ignores you, occasionally glancing over with what can only be described as bored indifference. The ultimate humiliation is not just losing. It's losing after a 3-hour shoving match and tumbling gracelessly into the void, your rival's triumphant, guttural squawk echoing behind you. And the dance. Oh, the dance. It is a language of pure biological desperation. Every move is genetically encoded, yet it feels no less foolish. The head bob must be performed at a specific rhythm, too fast, and you look anxious, too slow, and you look lethargic. The wing flashing must catch the light at the perfect angle to illuminate the patterns on your membranes, a feature you yourself cannot see, but must trust is impressive. The hopping is a test of stamina. You must hop and squawk until you are breathless, demonstrating your physical fitness, your sheer, idiotic vitality. The females watch this display with a critical, discerning eye. They are judging the size of your crest, the richness of your color, the volume of your squawk, the sheer endurance of your ridiculous hopping. And after all that effort, after weeks of this public humiliation, a female might simply glance at you, turn away with an air of utter disdain, and fly off, leaving you standing there, heart pounding, dignity in tatters, alone on your windswept stage. Let's linger on your decline. Old age is not a gentle slide into twilight. It's a catastrophic systems failure in slow motion. The tears in your wing membranes, for example, are not like a hole in a shirt. They create turbulence. They whistle in the wind. They force you to flap harder just to maintain altitude, consuming precious energy you can no longer easily replace. Every flight becomes a draining chore. Your landings, which were never graceful, now become actively dangerous. You misjudge your approach speed, your aging joints screaming in protest as you hit the ground too hard. You stumble, and a fall that you would have shaken off in your youth now results in a sprain, a pulled muscle, or worse, a fractured bone. A fractured wing finger for you is a death sentence, as final and absolute as a guillotine. The loss of status is a psychological torment to match the physical decay. It is the daily, grinding humiliation of being usurped. They do it with an air of contemptuous ease. They flaunt their strength, their vitality, their unbroken wings. They perform their mating dances on the ledge right above yours, a constant, noisy reminder of everything you have lost. The females of the colony, who may have once considered you, now look right through you. You are invisible. You are a ghost, haunting the edges of the society you once helped to build. This slow erasure is a cruelty that no predator's bite could ever match. It is the cold, hard logic of nature telling you, every single day, that your time is up, that you are no longer useful, that you are simply taking up space. Your end, when it comes, is the final insult. Let's say it is the Compsognathus pack. You are too weak to fly, huddled in the shade of a rock. You see them coming, their movements quick and confident. There is no fear in their eyes anymore, only hunger. You hiss, you snap your beak, a pathetic, hollow gesture of your former power. They are not deterred. They circle you, a tightening ring of small, sharp teeth. The first one lunges, and you are too slow to react. The bite is sharp, painful. Then another comes from the other side. There is no struggle. There is no fight. You simply collapse under the weight of their numbers. Your last sensation a flurry of tearing bites. Your last sight the indifferent blue of the sky you can no longer reach. You don't even warrant a killing blow. You are simply disassembled, piece by piece. Your passing does not even register as a minor event in the day-to-day life of the local ecosystem. You are simply recycled. And so, we return to your posthumous career, to the moment your bones are first held in a human hand. Think of Collini, that first bewildered naturalist. He holds your fossil, a slab of limestone containing a perfect, impossible skeleton. He is a man of science, but he is also a man of his time. He sees a creature with long arms and webbed feet and immediately assumes it is aquatic. He doesn't see a wing, he sees a paddle. He writes a treatise on his discovery, proudly announcing the unearthing of a strange, ancient sea creature. He is so certain, so confident in his interpretation. He has no idea that he is the first human being to look at the evidence of vertebrate flight and completely, utterly miss the point. This is the beginning of your relationship with humanity, a confident, well-articulated, and entirely incorrect assumption. It sets the tone for the next 200 years. Cuvier's correction, while scientifically astute, was no less insulting in its own way. He recognized your wings, yes, but he saw you primarily as a symbol of failure. For him, you were not a marvel of adaptation, but a monstrous and aberrant form, a creature so poorly designed that nature itself had seen fit to eliminate you. He admired your strangeness the way a physician might admire a particularly grotesque tumor. You were a freak, a dead end, a testament to the fact that not all of God's or nature's ideas were good ones. You were a key piece of evidence that the world had been home to monsters, and that, thankfully, they were gone. Your introduction to the human story was to be its first great monster, your otherness the very quality that made you famous. This perception bled into the reconstructions. The early paleart wasn't just inaccurate, it was malicious. Artists like John Martin in the 19th century depicted you as a satanic, bat-winged fiend, a creature born of nightmare. In his famous painting, The Country of the Iguanodon, you are shown in the sky, a dark, leathery menace with a mouth full of vicious teeth you never had, locked in mortal combat. This wasn't an attempt to reconstruct a prehistoric animal. It was an attempt to paint a scene from a gothic horror novel, and you were cast as the gargoyle. These images were powerful. They were printed in books and magazines, shaping the public's perception for generations. Science was slowly piecing together your skeleton, but popular culture was busy building your mythology, and the mythology was always more exciting than the truth. Think of the indignity. You were a creature that likely spent most of its day hunting fish, preening its pycnofibers, and trying to avoid bigger pterosaurs. Your life was probably a mix of the mundane and the terrifying, like most animals. But in the human imagination, you were locked in a perpetual, epic battle against everything, a screeching, blood-crazed demon of the ancient skies. They didn't just get your anatomy wrong. They got your entire character wrong. They projected their own fears of a savage, godless past onto you. You were the embodiment of the chaos that preceded their orderly, civilized world. This role as the villain was cemented in the 20th century. When films needed a prehistoric threat from the air, you were the default choice. The 1933 classic King Kong features a scene where a pteranodon, your larger, more famous cousin, swoops down and attacks Fay Ray. The creature is portrayed as a relentless, aggressive monster that has to be beaten to death by the heroic ape. This scene defined you for millions of moviegoers. You were the aerial menace, the mindless aggressor. Every subsequent film appearance built on this foundation. From 1 million years BC, where you famously carry off Raquel Welch, to the countless dinosaur movies that followed, your role was fixed. You were the screeching peril from above. The irony is that while your public image was being dragged through the mud, your scientific image was becoming more and more sublime. The discovery of your incredible diversity, the understanding of your complex aerodynamics, the confirmation of your fuzzy covering, all of it painted a picture of a sophisticated and successful group of animals. There was a growing disconnect between the scientific pterodactyl, a marvel of evolution, and the cultural pterodactyl, a cheap movie monster. But the monster was always more compelling. It was easier to fear you than to understand you. It was more profitable to make you a villain than to make you a protagonist in your own story. You were stuck in a pop culture prison, forever typecast by a species that preferred its monsters simple and its science optional. And that brings us to the modern hypocrisy, the age of your sanctification. The same culture that spent a century vilifying you now builds multi-million-dollar shrines to your bones. The museum exhibit is the final stage of your long, strange journey with humanity. Here, you are no longer a monster. You are a wonder. The language on the display placards is reverent. It speaks of mastery of the skis, incredible adaptations, and the lost world you inhabited. It conveniently omits the part where their own popular culture depicted you as a brainless, scaly demon for 100 years. It's a form of cultural amnesia. Consider the tourists. They stare at your skeleton, their faces illuminated by the screens of their phones as they try to get the perfect photo. They are looking at you, but they are not seeing you. They are seeing a symbol of deep time, of extinction, of a world without people. You are an abstraction to them, a piece of existential decor. They feel a little shiver of awe, a little pang of manufactured nostalgia for a time they cannot possibly imagine. They are consuming your tragedy as a form of light entertainment, a brief, thoughtful pause before they go back to their lives. You have been rendered completely safe, your terrifying, messy reality replaced by a clean, well-lit, and beautifully articulated skeleton. Your bones have become a mirror in which humanity can see a reflection of its own fleeting importance in the grand scheme of things. It's your final, and perhaps greatest service to them. A silent, bony lesson in humility, delivered from beyond the grave. Let's linger, for a moment, on the most absurd product of your modern legacy, the plastic toy. In a factory somewhere, A machine injects molten plastic into a mold that bears a vague, distorted caricature of your form. It gives you teeth you didn't have, a scaly skin you didn't possess, and proportions that would have made flight an impossibility. These toys are produced by the million, packaged in bright, cheerful colors, and sold to children. A child who has no concept of extinction or deep time will hold this plastic effigy in their hand. They will make it fight a plastic triceratops. They will make it emit a series of swooshing noises and pathetic screeches. This plastic idol is the final distillation of your entire existence. A 160 million year evolutionary journey. From the first tiny gliding reptiles to the giants of the Cretaceous. A life of constant struggle, of flight, of hunting, of bizarre mating rituals, and a lonely death. All of it has been compressed and simplified and warped into a 10-gram piece of non-biodegradable plastic. It is the ultimate indignity. To be turned into a cheap, inaccurate, mass-produced trinket by the primate species that inherited your planet. This toy is perhaps the most honest monument to your relationship with humanity. It is a relationship based not on understanding, but on appropriation. They took your name, they took your image, and they turned it into a product, another piece of disposable content in their endlessly consuming world. And what of your true nature? The fuzzy creature, the sophisticated flyer, the animal that walked on all fours with a strange quadrupedal gait. That version of you exists, but it lives in the dense, impenetrable pages of scientific journals and academic textbooks. It is a creature of data points, of phylogenetic trees, of biomechanical models. The scientific you is as inaccessible to the public as the real you is inaccessible to history. The public gets the monster in the toy, and the scientists get the data. Nobody truly gets you. You are forever fractured, a creature of two irreconcilable worlds, the one of fact and the one of fiction. So as you hang there in the silent, echoing hall of the museum, you are a paradox. You are a triumph of evolution and a victim of paleontology. You are a marvel of biology and a monster of mythology. You are a symbol of a wild, lost world and a product in a museum gift shop. Your story is a perfect tragedy, not because you went extinct. Everything goes extinct, eventually, but because of what happened next. Your tragedy is that you were found. You were named. You were misunderstood. And you were, in the end, loved not for what you were, but for the strange, monstrous, beautiful, and profitable ideas that humanity projected onto your silent, fossilized bones. You are the ultimate proof that for an animal, there is perhaps one fate even worse than being forgotten, being remembered by humans.